In this lesson, we will use the Nmap utility to assess organizational security. We are in the Nmap portion of the video series. This lesson is part of a video series that prepares you for the hands-on portion of the CompTIA Security Plus exam and is designed to give you hands-on experience with the operations and incident response section of the exam. So what is Nmap? The Nmap command is a network scanning tool in Linux used to discover hosts, services, and open ports on a network. Network administrators, security professionals, and researchers use the Nmap command. It can be used anytime, but is particularly useful during network reconnaissance, security assessments, and troubleshooting. The Nmap command is run in the Linux terminal. We will use it in Kali Linux or our Ubuntu box, it doesn't matter. The Nmap command is employed to assess network security, identify vulnerabilities, and ensure proper network configuration. To use Nmap, open a terminal and enter the following command followed by target IP address or host names to scan. The rest of the how is what this video is all about, so let's get into it. To get started, grab the companion guide from the link in the show notes below. Also, if you like this content, please make sure to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any new videos. So we have our companion guide and we're all set. So the first thing we're going to do is just be mindful about the ethical conduct here, which is using Nmap on systems or networks without proper authorization is unethical and potentially illegal. Always ensure you have the necessary permissions before scanning any target. On that note, the folks who make Nmap, scanme.org, has given us permission. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. So if I go ahead and open this page, it says scan me, and it has some examples here, but actually what we really want to do is just go right ahead and go into scanme.org. So I'm going to paste scanme.org, get rid of this. And what we really want to do is actually see it says go ahead and scan me. So that means we have written authorization and approval, and it says that this site is set up for machines to help us learn about Nmap and make sure we have Nmap installed properly. Now this is important, especially if you're on a red team or you're doing any type of penetration testing exercise for a company. You want to make sure you have expressed permission and authorization to scan their devices. Nmap is considered an offensive security or an OffSec tool, so we want to make sure we do that right. So with that out of the way, we can go ahead and actually scan scanme.org. So we'll do that in the typical fashion. I know you're familiar with getting to a terminal, so I'm just going to right click, open a terminal here at the desktop. Make that a little bit bigger. We're going to actually make the real estate a little bit bigger and go right ahead and actually scan scanme.org, and let's take a look at the results. Now it may take a little bit of time, and if you find yourself in a situation like that, you can just do up arrow and it'll give you a percentage of how much it's done or how far it's completed. And there we have it. We have a completed port scan. So I'm going to check off our ethical conduct and scanme.org. This is an official site that we can run port scans on, and we understand we have permission to do so. And we went ahead and actually did a scanme.org. So let's go ahead and analyze the output. First and foremost, it has a start time of when we actually completed or started the scan, I should say. It gives us some quick stats. So it tells us that the host is up 45.33.32.156. It gives us a speed, a latency, or the time it took to actually scan this site. It also tried to do a reverse DNS, and it shows although we nmapped scanme.org, it also has a reverse domain naming service of scanme.nmap.org. So this is good. So we know the host status is that it's up. Good. It gives us some port and services, which is actually showing up over here. So I'm going to get rid of this here because the port and services are actually a little bit lower. And these are the ports. So it tells me that port 21, TCP port 21 is open, and we know this is the FTP service. It also tells me that port 22 is open. This is SSH. I actually have a table of the top 1,000 ports, and this is an important point to make, especially for the exam. By default, Nmap scans the first 1,000 ports. So you see here, not shown. It says 990 are not shown. They're also closed, but they're not shown. The reason why there isn't anything there is beyond that is because Nmap only scans the first 1,000 ports. Obviously, we can scan more than that, but by default, that's what it does. Be prepared for a question or a variant of that question on the exam. We saw the reverse DNS. So although we nmap scanme.org, we see it's really scanme.nmap.org. So this part is done. Now, when it comes to port and services, it tells us the port, the protocol, the state of the port, and the service. So in this case here, we see that it has port 80, which is a web server. It's on port TCP. It is open, and the service is HTTP. If it was running HTTPS, secure HTTP, it would be 443. And we have a list of all of the different top ports, the popular ports, and the different services over here. Now, another thing we want to point out is sometimes you may get to ports that you're not familiar with. For example, you see this 313337. Now, granted, over time and with experience, you'll have a lot of these ports committed to memory. If you're not sure, there's a port database that you can visit. And I have the link here, speedguide.net.ports.php. If I launch that, it'll take us to this web server here. And actually, let's do that the proper way. Let's go ahead. If I launch that, it'll take me here. And I actually can search some of these ports. So for example, it says that this port is open 313. I'm not sure what it is. So let's go ahead and put that in. So we'll do a 31337. We'll actually search. It says it's elite port. We click on it and it gives me a little bit more about the service. So it tells me that it's running a hacker cracker spelling and it's giving us some type of buffer overflow. It looks like it's back orifice, which is a tool that you can get into, and it gives you a remote control execution, and they're running this for exercise purposes on Nmap, and they're running it off of port 31337 TCP and UDP. But the point that I'm trying to share here is that if you don't have all of these ports committed to memory, you can come to speedport or speedguide.net.ports to get an update on this. The other thing we can do is I'm going to clear my screen here, and after I clear my screen, I can also scan by a specific port. So I'm going to do nmap scanme.org, and in this case here, I'm going to call out the port command, and I just want to see if it has SSH open, and this is good. So I see SSH on port 22 is open. We already knew that, but if I'm looking for a particular service and a particular port, I can do that on and with ScanMe and with Nmap. So let's go ahead and select this, and let's do a TCP scan, because if we saw in the first time when we did a regular scan just without any options, most of the ports just came in, and as mentioned, we said that it will give us the first 1,000 ports. So I can go ahead and do this. It will actually be the same thing, because if you see here, it's the same exact command. The first 1,000, it'll look the same, because by default, this is what Nmap does. You're going to remember this for the exam. And it gives me a little bit more. It looks like there's a couple of higher ports here that are open, and that's fine. We see that we have the information here. Again, port 1 to 1000. There's a few more because we see some of these filtered ones, all TCP. If I want to go a little higher, let's clear. And I can go beyond 2000 or 1000, right? So I can make this 1000 and make this 2000. And we can do all the ports higher than 1000. Again, it doesn't do this by default, but we can scan as many as we like or need to. And it says that they were all closed, and that's okay. But we want to demonstrate that you're not constrained to the first 1000. You can scan above. You can actually go to the top, which is 65,000 ports. So we're going to select this off as a housekeeping exercise. And let's do a UDP scan. And we're going to do this one a little differently. For example, if you notice when we did the regular scan, it was all TCP ports. So if I just do a regular scan, I had TCP ports, but I know on one particular router that we have on this network, for example, the 172.16.1.1 is actually the router. And right now, this was a regular scan of scanme.org, and it's all TCP IP. But I have a router on this, a router and DHCP servers. So I have one 172.16.1.1, and we know it's alive here. I also know that I'm running DHCP on it and a couple of other services. Now I can go ahead and Nmap this as well, and I'm going to do Control A to get to the beginning of the line. I'm going to do Nmap. In this case here, I'm just going to do a regular sweep of all of the first 1000 ports on this router. This is a router that we have set up for the purpose of exercises. And if you notice, we have a couple of ports here that are TCP. What I want to show you here is that there are other services like UDP services that are running on this router. We know this for a fact because we set this up in a previous video, and I'm going to filter some of the TCP UDP ports. So I'm going to clear all of this. Let's do TCP and UDP and see what do we have. And we know that DHCP is running on UDP port 67, and if it had a client, it's running on UDP port 68. So what I can do here is, rather than by default just search TCP ports, I can actually go ahead and do UDP ports. And the way I do that is Nmap -scan uppercase UDP, and it's going to tell me that I need the sudo command, which is fine. So I pass it through sudo, I hit enter, pass password through, and we'll give Nmap a moment to run through its sweep for the first 1000, and it's going to give us all of the UDP ports that are available or open in the 172.16.1.1. So while that's happening, I'm going to close this off or tick this off, and it tells me that, okay, UDP port DNS service is running. This is true. And also network time protocol 123 is running on this server, which is true. My DHCP server isn't showing up, maybe because it's filtered. So let's go ahead and do a little bit more recon, because I know we have DHCP servers because this computer is actually getting a DHCP server. DHCP is sitting on port 67 as a server. So we're going to call this port out specifically. So it's -su, or we can just go ahead and just call the port out specifically. I've got my port and 67 and see what happens. And it tells us that it's filtered. And this is something that we want to make a difference here, is that although the port is up, it is filtered because of firewalling purposes, but that doesn't stop us from using Nmap to do a scan. So by default, Nmap is doing TCP scans, but we can use UDP scans to look at ports or services that may be using UDP protocol rather than TCP. The big difference between TCP and UDP, TCP is connection oriented, UDP is connectionless oriented. Takes a little bit less bandwidth. Sometimes it's a little bit faster depending which protocol that you use. Okay, so we're going to clear our screen here, and let's go ahead and do some service and versioning detection. So first and foremost, let's just see what a regular one looks like. And let's go back to regular scan me. And as you guys know, what we can do is just go through history. I can use the history command to do this. So I missed that one there. I do the history command. I like 484. That's just a regular one. So I go and use the exclamation point or bang, and I say 484. It's going to call that command, and it's going to actually execute it, and it's going to give me the answers there. So I'm going to clear the screen so we can bring that on top, up arrow, so it's fresh and right off the top. And what you're going to see is Nmap is going to do a regular TCP scan of the first 1000 ports, and it gives us the port, state, and service. I know that TCP port 21 is open, it's running the FTP service. So on with port 22's SSH. It tells me that TCP port 80 is filtered, which means that it's open, but there's some kind of firewalling that's preventing Nmap from really doing a deep dive. The rest are closed, 990. But what I would like to do is get the versions of these software. So I want to get a sense what's actually happening with the different versions. So I can throw the -s scan version for service and version detection, and we'll take a look at these and see the comparison of the two different types of scans. So default scan without any switch, and coming up shortly is the service and version, and it gives me a little bit more information. So what I see here is that we have not only the port, the protocol, the state open, filtered, or closed. It gives me the service, which is TCP, SSH, HTTP, but more importantly, it gives me the versions. So if we were asked to create a report, a vulnerability report for this particular host, I would be able to create this report and say these are the ports that are open, the states, filtered, the service, and the versions. And if there were any vulnerabilities or exploits, well, we would now do a little bit more research. For example, if there was an exploit, a known exploit or a way of taking advantage of OpenSSH 6.61, we know that this service is running on this unit and we can take advantage of that. Okay, so this is the version. Now I threw a lot of switches your way, but you know what? You don't have to commit all of this to memory. So Station X is a website. You have this link that you can go to here. It actually has most of the common switches and it gives you a lot of the cheat sheets. Now granted, you can't take this into the exam, but this is good information you can take with you when you're working on a site, when you get your new job, or maybe on an interview if you need to demonstrate your understanding of Nmap. And it has most of the popular ones here, and we actually went through a couple of them. You can also go ahead and generate your own of trying to remember the exact syntax and use some AI, either one of those generative AI tools. You can actually put in, I'm trying to find out if this server is running this service on particular ports, and it'll create the script for you. You can also go ahead and get the cheat sheet this way, which is some of them are just available as a PDF. I'm just looking at it this way here, and we have a cheat sheet here for Nmap. So this is looking all right. Let's go ahead and clear the screen here one more time. And what I wanted to show is, again, the outputs. For example, let's say that you are running this as recon. Now, usually this comes in during the cyber kill chain. The cyber kill chain, as we briefly spoke about it in a previous episode, is reconnaissance. So this is where we're just doing our open source intelligence. In this case here, this is considered invasive. Nmap is an offensive security tool. It's an OffSec tool, but you can use it for recon work. And this is why we're looking at it from this perspective, which is if you want to scan your results, for example, let's just say it's not for reconnaissance work. We're doing research on a server that we manage or a network that we manage. We can go ahead and actually output those results to a text file. Now, in this case here, we're going to use the Nmap, and we'll just examine this output, which is nmap-scanme.org, and the output is going to be a text file, and we're going to say results.txt. And if I hit enter, not only will we have the results that we have seen on the screen, more importantly, it'll be saved to a text file. So now we have the output here. If I cat that file, which is, I just want to see what it looks like on the screen, I have a file that we can call up, and if you have to put this on your report and save this for a later, you can do that by outputting the results. Personally, I like to just redirect outputs without using the different flags. For example, if you use the greater than sign, you can output files, just redirect anything from the terminal to a file. So I'm going to just call this one test, make it easy on myself, .txt, and this is fine as well. This works exactly the same way. And what's going to happen here is after it gets the output, it's going to redirect the output to this file. And that works with just about any Linux command. Then I can cat the test file. And now I have a file that I could use for my report if this is something that we were doing for auditing purposes, and say this is what's happening on this server. Then the other thing we can do is actually ping, just a regular ping. Nmap can be used for pinging. So let's go back on this side here. Let's fix this so that way we'll have our guide here. So I'm going to clear, and I'm going to just bring this back up, which is the regular scan that we've had. And this is just a regular Nmap for a ping, just to see if it's up. So this is using Nmap as a regular ping device like hping3 or just regular ping. And then we also move to scripting agents. As I mentioned before, the Nmap default characteristic with this script with no script specified is the first 1,000 ports. This can be limiting in some cases, but in other cases you can say I want to run the banner script. So we'll go ahead and run the banner script. I put it in on the Ubuntu side, and this is going to give you more functionality and more capabilities. Now this usually is not on the exam. This is just extra, and my device is off, so I'm going to just do the router here. This is a different IP address for a slightly different computer, and we're going to take a look and see what the results look like if we run the script equals banner. This is basically banner grabbing using Nmap as a banner grab, and you can use a scripting engine to do that. And it gave us a little bit of information on it. It tells us what's going on with 53. We can also combine some of these scripts. So in this one here, it's a -- script. I'm going to say equal banner, and I'm going to call the HTTP script so that we can get a little bit of information. And you see we add and make this an addendum or add the HTTP. Now, last but not least, Nmap is considered a noisy scanning engine, which is if I have an intrusion detection or an intrusion protection system like Snort or any type of security incident and event management system, just because I'm scanning doesn't mean I'm undetected. You have tools and feelers that can tell if you've been under a ping sweep or an Nmap scan. So there are these switches or these timing and performance that can give you different types of scanning speeds. For example, if we go back to our cheat sheet, there is some timing and performance, and calling out different switches like a -T0 means paranoid. This is going to try and evade an IDS, an intrusion detection system. And if we're just looking for research and we're more for speed, we can optimize for speed and say the speed is -T5. It means that this is going to scan very quickly. We're not trying to avoid detection. We're trying to do research. So if I come here, I can just go ahead and actually just bring this up on this side here. So I'm going to go back on the Ubuntu side, clear the screen, and just call the -T flag. And this one here, I'm going to assume there's an IDS here and I want to evade detection. I can use different timing and performance switches so that way we can try and come in under the radar using just a ping, maybe a second, and hopefully there's no pattern recognition from the IDS, also known as the intrusion detection system. So this was quick and dirty. Just want to give you a heads up about Nmap. We'll see other scanless systems. For example, as I said, this is noisy. When we move on to scanless, I will use a different scanning engine and use that as a proxy server. In other words, the scanning engine will be coming from a web service. It'll scan, give me the same information we've been looking for, but it won't have my IP address. The source IP address will be of the web server, and we'll do that in scanless. But before we get there, if you want to get help, I can always break this out here because I'm on paranoid with this switch here. I can always do an Nmap and do a --H, which is just one dash for the help. And it'll give us all of the switches we had looked at here. And we also have them on the cheat sheet, but you can also call them through the help command. And if we go over to just traditional help, I'm just going to escape out of this, clear to get on top, and now we can just do the man Nmap to get the full-blown manual. And that's Nmap and the reference guide. Remember that Nmap scripts can be powerful, but should only be used responsibly and with permission on networks that we have authorization to scan. Always make sure we have proper written authorization before scanning any network or system, and we know that ScanMe was a site that was set up specifically for this, and also the 172.16.1.1 was a router that we built, so we owned and operated. We gave ourselves permission to scan it. See you at the next session. We will discuss scanless.